Working with layers in Adobe Illustrator. Even if you are familiar with layers, there are still a few concepts we need to know and consider when working with multiple artboards. This will make it easier to export, import, and amend our files in the project. Layers in Illustrator work similarly to any other software in the Adobe suite. The main differences that we need to consider are that Illustrator layers cannot be grouped inside folders as we do in Photoshop. If we have multiple objects inside a layer, those objects will be exported and then imported into After Effects as a single object. So we need to break them down into individual layers if we want to use them separately. Empty layers will still be exported and imported into After Effects, and when selected, they will show up as an empty layer in the form of a dot in the lower left corner. These empty layers can be recognized in Illustrator as they are missing the drop-down arrow. On the left, you can see I have two layers. If I select Layer 1 and add a square to any of my artboards, an arrow is now visible next to the square thumbnail preview, indicating that there is an object on that layer. Layer 2 doesn't have that arrow, so therefore, it is an empty layer. An excellent Illustrator feature is if you click on a layer and delete it, a pop-up will appear indicating that you have content on the layer. Whereas, if you delete an empty layer, the pop-up will not appear and the layer will immediately be deleted. Naming our layers. In order to change the name of the layer, all we need to do is double-click on the name of the layer to make it editable. However, if we click on the thumbnail or any other part of the layer, a window will pop up where we can also change the name and the outline color of the assets on the layer. For example, if we change it to green and go back to our artboard, any selection on this layer will now have a green outline. Naming layers can be quite a challenge and sometimes an impossible task due to time restrictions and files having large amounts of layers. But taking the time to do it is worth it, because it will make it easier and faster to work inside After Effects. Dividing layers into assets. As briefly mentioned before, if we have a layer that has multiple assets on it, when exported, all the assets will become a single layer, and that might be something we don't want, especially if we want to animate elements individually. To fix this without having to create new layers and copying and pasting each element to the new layer in the same position, we can use the Release Layers sequence feature. Select the layers we want to break into individual pieces. Make sure all the assets are ungrouped. Otherwise, it will create a copy of the same layer. Then click on the hamburger menu on the Layers panel, and here we'll find the Release Layers sequence option. Don't forget to name your layers to something that will be easily identifiable in After Effects. Once we click on this option, we'll see that we have now sublayers inside our main layer that we selected. These are now individual layers and represent each of the objects that we have on that layer. The only problem is that if we export and import our file into After Effects like it is right now, we would still have a single layer with everything grouped on it. This is because After Effects can't handle a sublayer structure from Illustrator. Therefore, in Illustrator, we need to select and drag out those sublayers so that they become individual layers and are separated from the main layer and recognizable. If we go back to After Effects and re-import our file, we can now see that all the layers are separate and ready to be animated individually. Exporting layered files. As we briefly mentioned in the last lesson, when exporting multiple artboards, each file will export any asset that is inside the artboard boundaries. As an example, we'll look at the following file. We have two artboards and a few layers. From bottom to top, we have the following layers: background text, circles, squares, triangles, and star. If we export this file now, we get two different files for each artboard. Artboard A has been exported with the background, text, circles, and square layers. Artboard B has the background, text, circles, triangles, and star layers. But why was Artboard B exported with the circle layer if that is an asset from Artboard A? This is simply because a sliver of the circle is touching Artboard B, so Illustrator includes it as an element of Artboard B. What happens when we import these files into After Effects? we might expect our circle on artboard A to be complete, so that if we want to animate it moving across the screen, the entire object is visible. But as you can see here, After Effects will always crop the layer to the boundaries of the artboard. If we look at artboard B, the same thing has happened, where we only have a small sliver of the circle in our composition, even though the After Effects selection still shows the outline of the full size of the circle. This is something that is very important to consider when working with the layers inside Illustrator so that they are prepared correctly for use in After Effects. Anything that's outside the boundaries of the Illustrator artboard will be cropped when imported into After Effects. Conclusion. Working with layers makes it easier to manage, import, and export our files for After Effects. This knowledge can be connected with the use of artboards to maximize its effectiveness. But we still need to consider many of the conditions that come with using both Illustrator and After Effects, as there are certain functionalities that might not work as we expect them to, and that might throw a spanner into the works if we're not aware of them.